the college or university students, do you know what are the best strategies for getting your assigned reading done strategically? And you're freaking out because you're not used to having to read so much for your classes, either because you're coming straight from out of high school, or maybe it's your first graduate course.
They're trying to murder me.
So what strategies can you use to get through the reading? In this video, I want to talk to you all about the strategies that most of your professors do not tell you about, even though these are the same strategies that they use themselves, whether they want to admit it or not. But we do not generally expect you all, the students, to complete the readings word for word, except maybe if you're in the STEM disciplines where assigned reading is much more concise. And many of these strategies come from Karen Rosenberg's book chapter titled Reading Games, Strategies for Reading Scholarly Sources. So tip number 1, for starters, pay attention to the title of your assigned reading. It will signal what the reading you are doing is about in the first place. Also pay attention to the headings and subheadings, because the headings and subheadings can signal what the major topics and methods are in your reading. Tip number 2, consider reading the full introduction. The introduction section of a book chapter or article usually lays out the entire reading. It will tell you the who, what, where, why, and sometimes how components. It will tell you the thesis, the author's methods, their primary sources, and sometimes all of the information in an introduction and conclusion are found in an abstract. However, please note that not all of your academic peer-reviewed journal articles or book chapters will come with abstract. Tip number 3, identify the thesis statement or thesis statements. The thesis statement is the central argument being made in the reading, and sometimes you will come across complex readings where there's a 3-sentence or 1-paragraph long thesis statement. Regardless of how long or how convoluted the thesis statement is, make sure to identify it. Also, make sure to identify its sub-arguments. Sub-arguments can refer to additional arguments that are not always necessarily the central focus of the reading. Tip number 4, highlight, circle, and make note of key terms that emerge in the reading. Identifying key terms are more obvious in textbooks, but not so much in journal articles where you don't have important names and phrases emboldened. And so what would be considered key terms? Recurring names of important people, places, events, concepts, and themes that emerge throughout the reading. Tip number 5, if you are pressed for time, read every body paragraph's first and last sentences. If you have a little more time, consider the first 2 sentences and last 2 sentences of each body paragraph. You should only read the whole paragraph if you do not understand the points of the first and last sentences. Tip number 6, speaking of being pressed for time, consider timing yourself and practice strict discipline while you time yourself. In graduate school, I would set my phone or physical timer to 15 or 20 minutes. And during those 15 and 20 minutes, I focused strictly on skim reading. And I did not allow myself to go on Facebook. I would not allow myself to answer my phone, even if it was ringing, would not grab a snack, and in extreme cases, sometimes I did not even allow myself to go to the bathroom until that time was up. When that time is up, use it to take a 5 to 10 minute break. Stand up and stretch, maybe do a brief exercise, and maybe reward yourself by going on Instagram or TikTok. The other day, a student of mine mentioned how she would reward herself with a snack in between breaks. And so by creating a system of rewards and incentives when you're reading, this can help motivate your brain to get the reading done. But once those 5 or 10 minutes are up, get back to work. Also, think about how you want to distribute the time you have to read. Maybe in some cases you only have 2 hours to do the reading because of your work schedule, family obligations, or other obligations that got in the way of your study time. In cases like these, back when I was in graduate school, I would tell myself no more than 30 minutes to finish the introduction, 1 hour for the body paragraphs, and 30 minutes for the conclusion. Whatever I didn't get to read in those time limits that I set for myself, too bad, because I need to go to bed or I have a long day ahead of me tomorrow. And surprisingly, even after setting those time limits up for myself, I was still able to get a gist of what the reading was about. And I was even able to participate in class discussions. Tip number 7, always read the full conclusion section. The conclusion will usually summarize the author's findings and conclusions. And similar to the introduction, the conclusion will restate the arguments, except the conclusion section will often provide a summary of the content that is found in the body paragraphs. And tip number 8, throughout your reading, make sure that you are taking notes or making small annotations or markings on the margins of your reading. As Rosenburg says in the article, sometimes our mind might trail off as we're reading, and you'll forget what you were reading about in the first place. Making those annotations will keep you on track with your reading. So, that's it. In brief, those are my top 8 skim reading tips, which are inspired by Karen Rosenberg's Reading Games chapter. Thank you for tuning in, and happy reading.